So hello and welcome to this class where we're going to be looking at some restorative postures, but the difference being that I'm going to add some movement to them. So usually restorative postures are postures that are sort of like you put yourself up with like props, bolsters and blankets and you just lie there and you just allow yourself to relax into the postures and about deep relaxation. But sometimes if my mind is very active, or sometimes if I'm not wanting stillness, then what I like to try and do is to use props and put myself into comfortable positions and use the comfort of props, but also add movement to the postures themselves. So this will sort of like hopefully become a bit more obvious as we start getting into the practice. So regarding props, you'll need a bolster and a blanket. That's all I'm going to use, and also a yoga mat, but you could just use a floor or a rug if you wanted to. There is one posture in it that we're going to look at, downward dog, so that's the only one where you might need something a bit more sturdy and less slippy. Yeah. So we're going to take the bolster to begin with and place it sort of like so it's parallel to the long edge of the mat. And then what we're going to do with the blanket is just to create some sort of support for the head itself. If you haven't got a bolster, you could also use like another blanket and just sort of roll it up. I've also done these in classes where we've used an additional rolled up yoga mat as well. So we're just going to come and lie down onto the bolster. So my bum is nowhere near the bolster. The most important thing for me is that my head is supported by a blanket. Yeah, so I'm just sort of shuffling so that my head's got adequate support. Now, I'm going to keep the knees bent so as the feet on the floor. If you find that the chin is jutting up quite a lot in the lower back and the back of the neck is sort of quite high arched, you might need a little bit of additional support underneath the back of the neck so that the chin sort of tucks under slightly. Now, the arms are just going to be positioned out by the side. Before I go any further, what I'm going to do is just press down through the feet, just do a little tuck of the pelvis. I'm lifting the buttocks up, tucking the pelvis under, and placing the lower back down onto the mat so that I can just sort of feel that the lower back isn't too much in a lumbar curve. And then the movement that we're going to work with here is just to very, very slowly start to take the knees towards one side. So as I take the knees towards the right, the weight is sinking into the right buttock and the left hip is slightly lifting up. So the goal here isn't to get the knees to the floor, it's just shifting and creating a bit of slow, mindful movement. And then I'm bringing the knees back to the center, and I'm noticing the weight of the buttock sinking equally into both sides. And then I'm going to go to the other side, so now I'm feeling the weight sinking to the left buttock, and the right buttock is lifting up. It's slightly going towards the left outer hip, and then back towards the center. And again, for me, it's like I'm moving in slow motion, I'm moving through mud, I'm just going side to side. Now, one of the lovely things about moving like this is that when we've got props and support underneath the body, then it's also going to sort of like allow the body to move in a slightly different way, but also sometimes the props can start to massage the tissue as well. And so I'm going to start to add to that. So again, I'm still not sort of going too far side to side, but as the knees go towards the right, I'm just going to roll the head a little bit towards the left. And then bringing the head and the knees back to center. And again, I'm just sort of moving very slowly. And then as the knees go towards the left, the head's going to roll towards the right. Again, it's not about how far I can go. It's not a practice for looking at, like the longest or the biggest range of movement. We're just sort of trying to bring movement and restoration to the body. It's very easeful movement. And then the other movement you can add is as the knees go to the right, head rolls to the left. I'm just going to slide that left hand a little bit more towards the left. So that just helps me to feel a little bit more openness through that left rib cage, left side of the chest. And then as I exhale and bring the knees back to center, head back to center, the elbow can bend a little bit and the hand can slide in. And so as the knees go towards the left, the head rolls towards the right, and I'm sort of reaching that right hand actively towards the right, not sort of too actively, but just to sort of feel that increase in stretch-like sensation across the right rib right side of the chest. Just going side to side. And I cued the breath there, and I sort of said, like, because I'm inhaling and moving and feeling that stretch, it just feels natural for me, and exhaling back towards the center. But it might be different for you. You might be exhaling and moving, or inhaling back to the center. You might just be breathing in and out through the nose a couple of times per movement. Just play around with it and just find out what works for you. I'm noticing that as I'm going side to side, I'm also sort of sliding a little bit down the bolster. So occasionally I'm going to have to sort of slide the blanket a little bit more underneath the head just to support. We'll do this a couple more times. Sliding that blanket down when needed. So the knees, the head, the arm are all sort of like gently moving under the pressure of the bolster and the blanket. And when we're starting to feel relaxed, I'm just going to bring the knees back to center, head back to center, and just taking a couple of breaths, allowing the spine just to relax over the props and the lower back to release, and just noticing the breath returning to its natural rhythm. Then I'm going to roll over to one side. It's up to you, the right or the left side. Often we're advised to roll to the right, but I'm rolling to the left just so it's facing the camera. And whilst the bolster is there, I'm just going to either have my head on the bolster, or you could have the whole of the side of the body on the bolster, and just taking a couple of breaths, just lying on the side. Before then, sort of pressing into the hands and pushing yourself off the bolster. Now we're going to go into a little bit more of a twisting motion. For this, I'm going to use the bolster underneath my head. As I'm already on the left side, I'm going to work on the left side, but it's completely up to you which side you want to work on. And I'm just going to kind of lie on the side with the knees bent. I'm placing the blanket between the knees. You don't have to, yeah. And then we're stretching out that arm along the floor, and then the other arm or palm is resting on top. Now you want your head to be somewhere near the edge of the bolster, because we are going to roll sort of backwards and forwards along. So if you want to just check and twist, so you can look over your right shoulder that your head doesn't roll off the bolster. That's a good thing to do. Yeah. So we start with palm on top of palm, and then I'm just going to slide the top palm over the left palm as like I'm reaching towards the floor. And I'm actually twisting my spine now towards the floor. My left cheek is sort of getting a bit more squished into the bolster. And in this round, what I want us to do is just to take that right arm up towards the ceiling, or top arm up towards the ceiling, keeping that length through the right side, and just sort of like opening up the body like a book. It doesn't matter if the shoulder comes to the floor, that's great. If not, don't worry about it. And then I'm just going to bend that right elbow and slide that right hand across the top of the chest and the collarbones towards that left palm again. And again, reaching that right hand forward towards the floor, see how far that will go, and then taking that hand up towards the ceiling and opening up the body like a book. Good, and we'll repeat that a couple more times, so sliding across the collarbones, across the chest. That right palm reaches way beyond the left palm, getting a little bit more of the chest towards the floor, and then up. And you might sort of notice that this is sort of massaging the bottom hip, the bottom shoulder, as well as providing some very gentle supportive movement to the spine, the ribs, the hip. I think that's about 4. So this time, as I slide that right hand forward, rather than taking it up, there is the option this time to sort of drag those fingers above the head, so I'm still in contact with the floor. I can bend the elbows when I wish, and just sort of rolling. You may or may not want to look over that right shoulder. Then when we're back towards the collarbones, just sliding that hand across again. So very slightly different movement. If this one doesn't work for you, if you've got tight shoulders and you want to go back to opening like a book, you can. And again, I'm just sort of drawing that circle with one of my fingers. For me, it's just the second finger that's dragged along the floor. You might have the back of the hand dragging along the floor. You might have all the fingers, or it might be a little finger or a thumb. Again, it's not really important, what is dragging along the floor. Again, using the breath as feels right for you, whether it's an inhalation to open into the twist or an exhalation to open into the twist. Yeah, up to you. I'm going to do one more like a book. Yeah, so I'm stretching that right hand forward, keeping that length and opening that arm up just to see if I've got any more range of motion or movement in the shoulder joint, in the ribs, in the chest. And then I'm going to pause there just for a breath or two in that shape. And for me, it's just pulling a little bit on that right side of the lower back. So I'm just going to allow that right hip just to open up and bring the inner edge of the right foot to the floor. Just because that feels more comfortable. Again, I'm not looking for big stretching in this sequence or this practice today. Okay, and then we're going to roll on to the back. So I'm just going to place, if you have got the blanket between your thighs, just place it on your belly, just in between sides. And that feels comfortable underneath the neck, so I'm just going to keep it there. Take a few breaths. And it feels like I just like to sort of roll up and down the spine a little bit, so I'm bringing the feet to the floor and just tucking the tailbone and just rolling or pressing the hips up towards the ceiling, rolling up the spine. I'm not going to maximum just because my head's on the bolster. It just feels like I just like to explore that movement in the lower back and the pelvis and the spine. I've just done two, and then that feels enough. And then you can just roll over to the other side. I'm just going to flip over. Actually, no, wait. I'll just roll over with you. You just get the back view. And so you're just stacking the knees are bent. Bottom arm is out in front of you. Top arm is, top palm rather is resting on the bottom palm. And then first of all, slide that bottom palm out along the floor. And then keeping that length through the left side, reaching that left arm up towards the ceiling and over towards the left. Adjustment, pop there, and then sliding the hand across the top of the chest, collarbones, towards that arm. And just repeating that a few times. Again, working with your breath, however you feel, whether it's the inhalation for you that naturally wants to move, or the exhalation is where the twist is, or whether it changes. And if you do have a habitual way of breathing, what happens if you do try something different? And when you've done about 3 or 4 of those, remember there's that second option if you wish. So as that top hand slides along the floor, and then you could start to drag the fingertips along the floor in a big circle, drawing a big circle. Now we're adding more of a circular movement to the twist. Again, you can slide that hand back along the collarbones, out along the floor. I think I should have said like before, but if the bolster feels like it's in the way of the neck, by all means you do not need to use the bolster. But also you could swap and have the blanket. So underneath your head and the bolster between your knees if you preferred. There's no real right or wrong way of doing this. They're just sort of like they're lying on the props and sort of rolling over the props in different ways just to create some movement in a very restorative way. That feels like enough for me. I'm just going to do one more of those sort of like book opening movements. I'm sliding that left hand forward to get the length through the upper back, the thoracic part of the spine behind the heart, and then I'm trying to sort of see, does that shoulder rest on the floor? Again, there's a little pull just here on my left side of the lower back. So I'm just going to lift that left knee because it feels more comfortable and it allows that left shoulder to rest more on the floor. Again, if you have the bolster, it might not, the leg will already be lifted. It might not be needed, but just sort of finding a position where you can just rest for a couple of breaths. Some form of twist. And then rolling back onto your back with your knees bent, soles of the feet on the floor. Still got the head on the bolster. I'm going to place the blanket on the belly. And just do a couple more of those spinal rolls. So like bridge, but we're not going into a big back bend. I'm just sort of tucking the tailbone and rolling up, perhaps to mid spine's lifting up, that's about it, and then rolling back down. So again, sometimes it's more challenging for some of us to do less, which is where that sort of like restorative quality comes in, that we're trying to do less and we're just breathing in and out through the nose and just feeling and just taking a moment or two just to reconnect and listen to the body's needs and how it wants to move. Okay, and then once again, we're just going to roll over to one side and then once you've taken a couple of breaths on that side, pressing yourself up. And we're going to move the bolster out of the way for a moment, and we're just going to work with a smaller roll along the spine in different parts of the spine. So I'm just going to sort of grab the blanket. You could also use a towel for this and make it a little bit longer because I don't really want the roll to be really high. Some of you may want the roll to be really high. Personally, I sort of prefer it. I used to have, like big rolls underneath the spine, and now I actually prefer just something a little smaller. So literally, I'm going to roll the blanket up. It depends on how thick your blanket is. I'm just going to roll it, 2-3 times max. Do you know what I mean? You might want more, you might want less, and you can always change it. I know from experience that's about right for me. Now I'm pulling it a little bit further away from the top end of the mat than I know is necessary, because as we sort of like move up the spine, my head is going to sort of shuffle further and further up that way. So I'm going to start with it more towards the foot end. So the first position we're going to play with the roll is just underneath the armpit. So as I come to lie down on my back, I want the arms to be over the roll, and then the roll itself to be sort of more towards the thoracic part of the spine, which is the spine just behind the heart. So it's more sort of collarbone area, sort of nipple line, if you like, and the arms can just be out to the side. So going back to that movement that we started with, where the knees go to one side, the head goes to the opposite side, and just sort of moving very slowly to start with. And if on return you allow the weight of the body to sink into the blanket, you should start to get some really nice sort of massage-like sensations. And if it was me, I would be slowing down quite a bit now. The slower you go, the more you're going to notice about those little sensations and noticing if you're not yielding to the blanket and to the ground beneath you. We're just going side to side, breathing in and out of the nose. Again, if it feels like it's too much pressure and you want less pressure, you can either use something that's not, like a washcloth, or like a flannel, or just like a hand towel, just something very, very small underneath you. It's just providing a very, very mild bit of pressure into that vertebrae, that sort of section of the spine. And for some of us, certain sections of the spine are a little bit more sensitive or tight or don't have as much movement as others. And then I'm just going to do one more each side. Back to center, and then I'm just going to, you can either move the roll, but for me it's easier because I've got this flat bit. I'm just going to shuffle my body more towards sort of like the head end of the mat, just a tiny, tiny little bit. So I'm going to teach this like in 3 different positions. So, I've just literally gone down, about 5-6 centimeters or something, or 2 vertebrae. Just finding another spot which feels like, that's a nice place to explore. And then repeating that same movement of head going to one side, knees going to the other, And for me, it really is about releasing on the way back. Is when I sort of allow the weight of my body to sort of press into the blanket roll. That's when I start to get that lovely massage sensation between the vertebrae along the spine. Just notice that my head's not moving, so I'm going to move my head in the opposite direction to the knees. Again, there's a little bit of action in my feet. I'm spreading the toes. I'm deliberately pressing through either the big toe side or the little toe side, depending on which way the legs are rotating. I'm more interested in just sort of feeling the sensations along the spine. You're just feeling the weight of the back of the shoulders dropping towards the floor, the weight of the hips rolling from one side to the other. And now it's starting to feel a little bit hypnotic, like I could just carry on doing this forever and ever. And then next time the knees and the head come back to center, we're then going to shuffle one more time. So you're going a little bit lower down the spine. Now, in the past I have sort of gone and massaged the lower back, but today I feel like there's a bit of tightness just around the lower rib. It's just where the bottom of the rib is. Yeah, that feels a little bit tender, a little bit tight. So I'm just going to do a little bit of work there. And again, like if you've got more time and you want to press pause and do another couple of different spots on the spine with the roll, highly recommend it. You're just going opposite knees, head and knees going in opposite directions. You're just noticing, can you give the weight of the back body towards the roll? That action on the return is what's going to create that massage-like sensation along the spine. So you have a lot of different muscles and tissues running parallel along both sides of the spine, and also sort of tissues that crisscross over the spine. That's why I like sort of moving whilst I'm breathing, and sometimes like breathing a little bit deeper into the diaphragm area just underneath the lower rib, and really change the effect of what you're feeling, what you're experiencing. And then I'm going to stay in this position. If you want to shift it or move it to a slightly different position, that's fine. And then I'm just going to sort of see what it feels like to straighten both legs out in front. Yeah, that feels fine. And then I'm going to bend the right knee and bring the right foot to the floor. And so we've got right knee bent, right knee up towards the floor, left leg is more or less straight. And then I'm going to press into the right foot. And I'm going to lift my right buttock a little bit away from the floor, which is putting more now direct pressure into the left side of the spine. And I'm just sort of like reaching that right knee, I guess forward a little bit over towards the left, and slowly lowering it back down. So it's not a big movement. It's just really is sort of massaging that left side of the spine a little bit more. It's a bit of an asymmetrical movement. You want to turn the head towards the right side as the knee moves towards the left, or the right side gets lighter. Again, it's just so curious for me to go really slowly because I start to feel all these different sensations, feel all this sort of massage-like techniques happening along where the lower rib meets the diaphragm, meets the spine. And then we'll do the other side. So next time that right knee points up towards the ceiling, the right buttock is on the floor, sliding that right leg out. You need to pause between sides, that's fine. And then sliding that left knee in and up so that now the left foot is on the floor, the left knee points directly up towards the ceiling. And as I press through that left foot, just allowing that left buttock to lift up, which is putting more pressure into the right side of the spine, where the blanket is, and then controlling as the weight of the left side of the spine lowers onto the blanket, left buttock towards the floor. And just doing that a few times, you could roll the head towards the left as that left knee reaches across, kind of on a diagonal towards the right foot. Again, what are you doing naturally? Are you inhaling into the movement and exhaling into the return? Or are you exhaling into the movement and inhaling to the return? The body usually sort of like finds what it feels comfortable with, what feels right for it. You can always challenge that by trying something new. You could exhale as the left buttock lifts up and inhale as it returns. And as that left buttock releases towards the floor, straightening that left leg out. Pausing there just for a moment, just allow the weight of the body just to sink into the blanket roll. And then we'll bend the knees again, bring the soles of the feet to the floor and just rolling over to one side. And then before we go into some shoulder work, we're just going to do a restorative downward facing dog. And this is kind of optional if you want to, and it also depends upon the proportions of your body. Now, there's two different ways that we could do this. We're going to support the wrists either with the blanket or the bolster, and then we can support the head either with the blanket or the bolster. So I think what I'm going to try to begin with is to support the wrists with the bolster. So I'm just going to place the bolster towards the top end of the mat, and then I've rolled up the rest of the blanket to support the head, which will be somewhere between those hands. Now, if you place the hands directly in front of the bolster, mine tend to slip, so I'm just going to grab the sides of the mat a little bit so I've got extra support, tucking the toes under, lifting the buttocks up, and then the crown of the head can somewhat rest along the blanket. And again, I'm happy for you to bend the knees, bend the elbows a little bit, and we're resting the forearms, so it's stopping the chest from collapsing through the arms. And again, we won't be here for too long. But definitely if you want to sway the hips a little bit side to side, or sort of practice shifting the weight a little bit more forward into the hands and then back into the feet, you can add a little bit of movement that way. Or if you prefer just to be stationary, just allowing the forearms to rest against the bolster. And again, you don't want your neck to be sort of compressing or too much weight going into the crown of the head. Just a little bit of light pressure from the blanket. Again, if you have long arms, which I don't, you might actually need a lot of height to rest the head, which is fine. You can just allow the head to dangle down into space instead. And that feels enough for me to bring the knees back down towards the floor. And then I'm going to rest into child pose. And I'm lucky because I've got this bolster here to rest my forearms on. I've got the blanket to rest my forehead on. And just taking a few breaths. After that mild inversion. Okay, and then peeling back up. So from there, I'm going to move the props to the side for a moment. We will use them again in Shavasana, but before we do that, we're going to do a couple of shoulders, sort of mild shoulder stretches, which aren't really anything to do with restorative yoga, but I quite like, like opening up the chest a little bit, and opening up the front of the shoulder. So we're just going to come and lie down onto your belly. We'll start in somewhat of a sphinx pose so that the elbows are out underneath the shoulders. And then let's start by taking the right elbow over to the right side and slightly forward. So we're trying to get that right side of the chest towards the floor. And here I'm going to bring the right sort of cheek towards the floor, and then the left hand comes sort of towards where the left shoulder was, so that left elbow is up towards the ceiling. And here, before I do anything else, what I'm going to do is just sort of rock the body a little bit over. So I'm pressing to the left hand, and I'm sort of rolling the weight into the right hip. My knees bend a little bit and angle towards the left. And then as I release that pressure, the knees go back towards the center, and the weight goes equally into the right and the left front of hip. We're just sort of rocking So I'm sort of shifting the weight into the right hip, knees bend a little bit over towards the left and then back towards the centre. Again, just a little bit of that movement. Now you can either stay here, I'm not really feeling it in the chest, I'm just going to take that right elbow a little bit further out to the right and a little bit forward and push that right hand into the floor. So if you're staying with that movement, that's fine. If you want to take it a little bit further, you can bend the left knee so the left foot points up towards the ceiling. And then as you press into the left hand, the left knee lifts up and it's reaching back behind you somewhere, and then you're rolling back onto your front. Yeah. I'm just going to go in and out of that movement. Again, if that sort of like twinges the lower back, you can always sort of go back to the first movement. Some of you might have more flexibility and you might be just getting that left foot all the way towards the floor. I can actually get that left foot towards the floor, but I'm not. I'm deliberately not. Because I know that, like part of my brain wants to be goal orientated. And I'm trying to sort of like move away from that at the moment in this practice because I want it to be more about, just feeling the massage of that right shoulder against the floor. Good. One more, I think. And then to come out, I'm just going to sort of come back into that Sphinx-like position. And then starting in Sphinx, the left elbow is going out to the left, so that arm's about 90-degree angle, and then walking the left hand forward, bringing the left cheek towards the floor, and then that right hand somewhere by that right shoulder or right side of the chest. And to begin with, as I press into that right hand, I'm just rocking the hips so that the weight's going into the left side and the knees bend a little bit. And again, I'm liking to move on an inhalation today. Seems to be what my body is naturally wanting to do. And again, if you don't feel the stretch particularly on the chest or the arm, you can walk that left elbow a little bit more over towards the left, or sort of walk that left hand more forward. It's not a huge stretch. It's a sort of mild sensation. And either repeating that and just continuing it rather, or you can bend that right knee so that the right foot points up towards the ceiling, and then as you press through the right hand, the right knee can lift up and over behind you, and then back again. And just doing, I might change that position whether or not fingertips helps more, or palm pressing down. And let's do one more, whichever posture you decided to do, or variation, and then back to the center and pressing back up into Sphinx. Okay, so the second shoulder stretch that we're going to do, I'll do the left arm first. So then I'm going to walk this right elbow slightly further forward, and then I'm lifting the elbow up. I'm going to feed that left arm underneath the right and turn that left palm up towards the ceiling. Now I'm going to walk that right hand forward. So I'm trying to get sort of the chest or the collarbones, the front of the collarbones, just to sort of rest towards that left arm. Yeah. My head isn't resting, yours could be resting. The reason I'm not resting that is because I'm going to add that rocking motion. So I'm just going to sort of rock a little bit more towards the left side so that right armpit lifts up, and then I'm going to do the opposite as I exhale. I'm going to rock a little bit more towards the right side, putting a little bit more of the weight of the body into going side to side. I'm just using the weight of the body and that little bit of movement just to massage along the back of that left shoulder. I can also sort of feel it massaging the hips if I'm honest. And again, it's not the biggest sensation. Sometimes it helps me to spread the fingers of that left hand and sort of really push the back of the left hand into the floor, push the right palm into the floor. So I'm sort of trying to find that balance between, being completely passive and also a little bit active, so that I've got, some resistance in the movement, some control over the movement. What we call yielding is sort of like surrendering the body's weight and also sort of noticing the rebound. As there is an action, sometimes there is an opposite action that naturally occurs afterwards. This is how like the principle of rocking works. Okay, and then that's probably enough for that side. So I'm going to unfeed that left arm, come back into Sphinx just to start at the neutral position. Left elbow, forearm goes forward, that right arm goes underneath, right palm facing up. Walk that left hand forward. Just trying to sort of feel how much weight we can put into that right shoulder with ease. And then we're just going to rock towards right side and then roll towards left side. And just repeating that a few times. And again, playing around with how much effort you're putting in, how much ease there is. And for me, the effort is definitely in trying to spread the fingers on the right hand and trying to press that sort of back of the thumb into the floor. That naturally wants to just curl away. And then as that right arm is underneath, I'm going to roll over towards the right side. And then I'm just going to come and sort of like lie on my back just for a moment, just to sort of feel the effects of all of that movement. So it's up to you if you want the legs straight or the knees bent. But just take a moment just to feel the back of the body and its relationship to the floor. The breath as it breathes in and out through the nose. And for me, there's a lot of tingles and sensations across the chest, across the arms, and also sort of across the groin and the legs. It's almost like my body begins to listen again. It's like my mind is starting to be aware of all of the sensations and pulsations and tingles. And in my mind, I think, is that blood flowing? Is it my nervous system? Is it prana? Is it oxygen? What can I feel? And then we're just going to end with more of a stationary posture. Before we do, I'm just going to do a couple more of those sort of symmetrical, it's kind of like bridge pose, but they're more like a pelvic push up towards the ceiling. So the knees are bent, soles of the feet on the floor. I'm just pressing down into the feet, just getting, can I get the bum to lift up, but keep the lower back down, and then can I peel up each vertebrae of the lower back. I haven't got my head under a bolster, so I can go a little bit higher. But it's just sort of, like for me again, I can feel that tight area of the mid-spine, and just sort of like before I get to the lower back, there seems to be a little bit of tightness around the lower diaphragm, the lower rib, mid-spine. And that's different, like I practiced this a couple of weeks ago, and it felt completely different to this. So, it's one of those practices that the more you return to, the more you start to realize how, the bodily sensations are changing all of the time. Okay, and then next time the spine comes back down towards the floor, and then going to roll over again and press up to set up for a final position, which will be a little bit more stationary. So I'm going to go back to having the blanket roll underneath the armpit area, when we have the arms above it, And then this time I'm going to bring the bolster underneath the back of the knees. Yeah, so you might have to sort of just take a few moments just to set yourself up. So I'm just going to pull the blanket down a little bit more. And then have the armpits. And we're just going to stay in the one position so you don't have to worry about, like changing position. So again, the edge, notice how the roll sort of like sticks out underneath the armpit. Again, you could have the elbows bent if you'd like. It's not that comfortable for me to do that. I'm just going to sort of like move my body up a little bit more. Again, the back of the neck is long and not sort of sticking the chin up towards the ceiling, trying to sort of lower the chin towards the chest. And then the other thing that I'm going to do is just press my feet down into the floor, get that little tuck of the tailbone, which then emphasizes that opening in the chest. I'm stretching the legs out. So the bolster is somewhere sort of up, supporting the lower thigh, back of the thigh, and the upper back of the knee. Just sort of play around with it until it feels comfortable. It should sort of feel like the lower back and the belly area just sort of pulls into the floor. And then there's an opening around the chest. And just closing the eyes once you're comfortable. If you need to make any adjustments, you have got, 30 seconds, minute, just to sort of shuffle around, find what feels comfortable. Maybe the roll's too high or not high enough, or the bolster's not quite in the right position. So it's fine to just sort of like shuffle and fidget a little bit to find comfort in the body. And then once you've done all the fidgeting and the shuffling, just try to now just listen to the stillness. And the body itself is very rarely still because we have this flow of blood. We have the flow of energy. We have the flow of prana. We have the tingles of the nervous system, the sensations, pulsations flowing through the body. Sometimes we can feel the breath as well. Just giving yourself permission just to lie here for another couple of minutes. And I will just hold the space for you. So I'll still be here, and there's no need to worry about how long you'll stay here for. I'll just sort of count the next couple of minutes, and then I'll bring you out of it. But for now, just sort of rest in that silence. Enjoy that openness and just feeling and listening with your body to all of the sensations and the breath. And if you did want to stay here for a little bit longer, you can. And like you might not have anything else to do. You might just want to just lie there and just enjoy this sort of nice space for peaceful, sense of deep connection to your body and your breath, your mind. But if you'd like to end, just noticing your next exhalation. And at the end of the exhalation, perhaps adding either a pause or a further little exhalation, and noticing the effect that has on the next inhalation. And continuing just to breathe naturally, just finding a way for you to roll out of the pose by adding some movement. Again, you could sway the knees, you could bend the knees and sway the knees side to side. You could, roll the head side to side. You could repeat what we were doing with the knees to one side, head to the other. You could just rock a bit side to side. And then just finding a way to roll over to one side. If you need to move the props out of the way, that's fine. But I would just stay on your side for now, in just sort of like a curled up ball, like a fetal position. And keep the eyes closed and just take another couple of slow, easeful breaths. And after your next exhalation, just slowly allow the eyes to blink open. And again, without any rush or hurry. And you might even stay there for another couple of minutes on your side before you push yourself up to sit. You might be able to just sort of press yourself up and slowly roll up. No, definitely no rush, definitely no hurry. And then if you are lying on your side, stay on your side. If you'd like to sit up, that's fine. But in some way, just finding a gesture, whether it's palms together or palms on the heart, of just thanking yourself for just sort of finding that time to reconnect, to recenter, to re-find yourself, and to re-listen to yourself. It's so important that we find that much needed time for that. So thank you for practicing, and I look forward to hopefully practicing again with you soon.